in 1966, and getting there was more adventures than most of us will have in a lifetime. And after that, she had more adventures than most of us will have in a lifetime. So she's giving two talks today. This is part one, and part two will segue from the end of part one.
Should I start? Okay. Jai Baba. Well, here I am, telling my story for the 150th time, maybe. But I'm hoping that there's some people who have never heard it. That would be very nice. Is there anyone who has never heard my story? Two and a half people, okay. Great. Well, not only can you hear my story, but you can read my book, which has lots more stories in it. Anyway, I was born in Germany in 1945, which was not a good year to be born in Germany. My mother was Protestant, my father was Catholic, and so that was a bit of an issue with the family, because my father's family was much more dominating, and so my mother had us baptized as Protestant because my father was in the war, and you never knew if he was going to come back or whatever. So anyway, my father came back from the war, and the family got together, and we were the heathen children. The Catholics, the Catholic part of the family, they called us the heathen children. And somehow we understood that being the heathen children had something to do with money, how the inheritance was kind of at risk with the heathen children around. So they took us to the church. I was 5, my sister was 8, and they made us whole. They made us Catholic, and then we were okay. We were no longer heathens. So that was kind of odd. That was my introduction to religion and God. And it seemed to me very obvious that it all had to do with money. But then that's how it goes. So my father was very strict and domineering and was difficult as a child. And when I was 16, he passed away. And that sort of gave me liberation in a way, because then I could do whatever it was that I wanted to do. My mother had no power over me at all. She was just, anyway. And so at the age of 16, I was still in school, and my mother had enough money to give me a place to stay and food, but not enough to buy cigarettes and phonograph records and black leather jackets and all the stuff that I found important. And so when I was 16, I started getting into jazz. At the time in Europe, there were sort of the mods and the rockers. There were people who were into rock and roll and alcohol, and there were people into jazz and marijuana. So I went that route. And I would hang out in the jazz keller, the jazz bars and jazz places. And there were a lot of American soldiers that were stationed in Germany, because Germany was occupied by the Americans. And the soldiers that came around the jazz area, they obviously also liked marijuana. And that was sold generally by the Arabs, North Africans. And somehow the Americans were scared of them. To meet an Arab in a dark alley and buy weed, they did not like that idea. So I became the middleman. And I would buy the stuff from the Arabs and sell it to the Americans. And that worked very well, actually. was successful for me. And so then I was 16 years old, dealing pot to the Americans from the Arabs, and life was good. My mother was so upset with the way I lived and all, that she moved. She went to her sister's place in the mountains, and she said to my sister, "Here, she's all yours, you have her." And so I lived with my sister, and the apartment was a very big apartment. It was kind of divided down the middle. On one side was my sister and her drinking friends, and on the other side was myself and my pot-smoking friends. So this is how and my mother said, no, she left. So this went on for a couple of years, actually, until when I was 18, my girlfriend and I, we decided that we didn't really need the Arabs to buy the weed from. We could go to Morocco and buy it ourselves. So we hitchhiked to Tangier, to Spain, and took a boat to Tangier and bought a couple of kilos of pot in Tangier and brought it back. There was to cut out the middleman, more or less. And when on the way back, this is okay? Okay. On the way back, we went to the south of France. There was the jazz festival, and Miles Davis was the main person at the jazz festival. And this was all very exciting. Except it was not exciting to the French and to the French police, because there were meanwhile about 30 people sleeping on the beach waiting for the jazz festival to start. And so one day the police came and took all of us to the jail, but they had only one cell. The rest of us were all milling around the yard. And they decided to put us in a bus and drive us down the coast and let us out two at a time to break up this whole group of people. And so my friend and I, we were dropped off maybe 100 kilometers from Cannes, where we were, or Juan-le-Pin, whatever it was. And but our marijuana was at the train station, where we had given our luggage to a storage area at the train station. So we had to go back to get it. And when we get back, I forgot. Yes, I forgot. And one of my customers in Frankfurt was an American by the name of Mick Hamilton. And I sold him some weed and got to know him, a little bit. And so when we got back to the town where we had to pick our marijuana, Mick had arrived there with another friend to see us, to meet with us. And that was sort of surprising. And we got our pot and we hitchhiked back to Germany. And Mick was in the Air Force. Well, he was actually in the Army, but stationed on an Air Force base. And the other friends, the other American friends that we had there, they were all spies. They'd all gone to the Air Force language school together. And one was for Russia, one was for Poland, one was for Czechoslovakia, like that. And they all had an apartment in town, because at the Air Force you could live in town. And apparently the Air Force was not happy for them to all be together living in some apartment. And then they had been watching the mail and watching this apartment, and very quickly they seemed to discover that I had arrived with this marijuana. So the American police informed the German police, and the German police came to my house and busted me and all the pot. So that was not great. Now I have what to do. And from there, well, they wanted wanted me to be interrogated by the Americans, but I wasn't going to do that because I was German citizen. But they did put Mick in the stockade there at the Air Force Base, and they were going to throw him out of the military, and which they eventually did. But they never found any marijuana on him, but they had enough reason to believe that he was using. So they gave him they threw him out in the United States. They didn't give him a German thing, so he was sent back to the United States, and I was in Germany, and that was that. And I had to wait to go to court. My mother had meanwhile come back, and she was very, very nice. She would go to the meetings, the hearings with me, and she would tell them how wonderful I was, and how I'd fallen into bad company, and she told them I even knew how to cook. And so Mick was in New York and I was in Frankfurt, and I was waiting for my court case for the marijuana, and life was not all that exciting anymore at all. And hang on a minute. So Mick wanted to come back from the United States to Germany, but we didn't have any money. He didn't have any money. I didn't have any money. And so he and a friend got on some ship in New York to stow away back to Europe. And apparently they found him just before the ship took off, and they threw him off the ship. And so I had, my grandfather had collected antiques and furniture, and I had inherited some of that. I had no interest in antique furniture whatsoever, but my sister really liked it, so I sold my part to my sister, and she gave me the money to send to Mick to come back to Europe. So he bought passage on a ship and he came back to Europe. And when he landed in Amsterdam and in Rotterdam, the Dutch decided that he was a vagrant because he had no money. And they were going to send him back, they were going to repatriate him back to New York the next day or something. So I had to go up there to bail him out. And I did that. And I bailed him out, and he came to Frankfurt, and then we were together in Frankfurt, and we decided to get married, which we did. I was 18 and he was 20, I guess. And we got married in Frankfurt. And I don't know what our plan was, if we even had a plan, but I knew a Persian man from Iran who had a carpet shop, and he would buy old German Mercedeses and drive them to Iran, sell them, buy carpets, and bring them back. But he could only put one car into his passport per year. So he asked if we could import these Mercedeses for him, and we drove, and Mick had a friend with him from California. And so we signed up with Ibrahim to drive these old Mercedeses to Tehran, and then he was going to give us, I think it was $200 or something. And we said, that's a good idea, so we went, and we took off with Ibrahim and Sam, Mick's friend, and I had these girlfriends at the jazz place, and they said, can we come along? So we said, oh, sure, why not? One was 16, one was 18. And they decided to come along with us to Iran. And we didn't care. Yeah, sure, hop in. I mean, unbelievable. So when we drove in a caravan, with Ibrahim in the front, and then Mick drove a car and Sam drove a car. I didn't know how to drive, so I didn't drive, but I had one in my passport. And we drove across Turkey and all that. And one of the girls, the older one, she was 18, the younger one was 16, she kind of hooked up with Mick's friend Sam. And the younger one, Ibrahim, was sort of having dibs on the younger one, but she was not interested in him at all. So when we got to Tehran, our mail was sent to the American consulate, which is something that the American government allowed, that you can have your mail sent to the embassy or the consulate. And so we went to check our mail, and my sister wrote to us, and she said that that the police had come looking for us because the father of the girl was a policeman, and he decided that they had run away from home, which is not a crime. So he decided that we had kidnapped them and took them to the Middle East to sell them, which was actually something that did happen. Young European women ended up in Saudi Arabia or somewhere. So we were now on the Interpol list for kidnapping minors, and with intent to sell. And so we told the girls that you've got to go back to the German consulate and give yourself up. And Sam said, yes, I'll take them. And they left, and they did not go to the German embassy. They vanished into Iran, and we were there wanted by the Interpol. So we confessed this to Ibrahim and told him that we really need to do something. So Ibrahim took us to the headquarters of Savak, the Shah's secret police, and we went from one room to another, and he would talk and talk, and somebody hit him at some point, and he would give him money, and eventually he said, let's go, we're good. And he had bought us off the Interpol list somehow. The girls were still missing somewhere in Iran. And so now we had Ibrahim's $200 that he paid us for taking the Mercedeses. And we were in Tehran. We decided, let's go east. So we decided to go wherever east was, you know. I remember thinking Nepal was a town. I didn't know it was... I mean, I wasn't that bad, but actually I did think Nepal was a town. And so we hitchhiked across, when we hitchhiked only, because that's how it was our mode of transportation. So we hitchhiked across Iran, and when we got to the Pakistani border, we were very nervous about that Interpol thing, but it turned out we were fine. They let us go. And we bought in Iran, we bought these watches, wrist watches, that were sold by the weight, by the pound, not by the watch. And they didn't have a band, they were just with the watch. And apparently you smuggle them to India and Pakistan, and you could sell them for a lot more. Because at that time in India, nothing was imported legally into India. If it wasn't manufactured in India, you couldn't get it, unless you had to buy it on the black market. So we bought these watches and to take to India, and then we hitchhiked across Pakistan and went to Afghanistan, and eventually got to the Indian border. And in Pakistan, we had bought for us to eat on the road this stuff they called hunter's beef, which was like smoked beef jerky stuff. And we had these watches in a bag, and when they were not battery, you had to wind them up, and they ticked until they were finished ticking. And so we had this bag full of ticking watches, and at the border, at the India border, and the Indian customs said, "What's in this bag?" And we said, "Beef." And he jumped back, "Oh, go, go, go." because it was the holy cow cut up in. Anyway, they let us go. So we went to India, and when we entered India, they asked how much money we had, and we didn't have much money at all anymore because, and we said we don't have any money, and the border guard said, Mother India must take her children, rich or poor. Welcome to India. Unbelievable. And so then from India we went to Nepal, and we just kind of sort of hung around a bit. And in Nepal, we bought a whole bunch of hashish, and with the idea to take it to Japan and sell it to American military in Japan. That was the plan. So we had this big bag of drugs, and we took that from Nepal to Burma, to India, to Burma, to Thailand, to Malaysia, to Singapore, to Hong Kong, all the way to Japan. And we just crossed borders with this bag, and somehow nobody stopped us. And when we got to Japan, it was interesting because we had taken a boat, and the boat wasn't a cruise ship, it was sort of a transport ship. And it arrived in Kobe, Japan in the afternoon. And we asked if we could stay on the boat until the next morning. So we would then hitchhike on to Tokyo. And he said, sure. So we got off the boat in the afternoon, and there was the customs. They were looking through people's luggage. We were like, oh, wow, what are we going to do? Well, the next morning we got off the ship with our bag, but nobody was there. The customs had closed because no ship had arrived. So we just, for some reason, were very fortunate with this. And we stayed in Japan for a while. Then we were thinking of going to the United States, but I had tried to get an American visa, and I was denied because of my police record for the time when I had taken drugs in Germany and I was arrested. And so they refused my visa in Frankfurt, and went in Tokyo, and they refused my visa in Tokyo. So we decided, what are we going to do? Let's go back to India. So from Japan, we decided to go back to India, and we stopped in Singapore for a while. And as we were sitting there at the Chaiwala in Singapore, this old friend of mine from Paris came out, and she had a man with her who sat with us. And we passed around the hash pipe, and he said, no, thank you, I'm trying not to take drugs. I said, wow, trying not to was something very odd. Either you do or you don't, but you don't want to and you try not to. So we said, well, what's that mean? And he said he was on his way to India to meet with his master, Meher Baba. And Meher Baba didn't like drugs, and so he's trying not to take drugs. We said, wow, if you want to take drugs, find yourself another guru. There are plenty of gurus in India that don't mind you taking drugs. And they take drugs themselves. So anyway, his name was Steve Simon. He was from Miami, and he joined. He didn't have the money to go to India from Singapore. So for some reason, we paid for his boat ticket to Bombay. I don't know why. It's not normal that you do that, or when we were in Japan, we sold all the Nepalese hash. We had quite a bit of money, actually. So we were okay financially. We bought this guy a ticket to Bombay. And then eventually we ended up in Bombay ourselves, and now we were back in India, what we had wanted to be, where we wanted to be, but there was nothing really to do. What are we doing here? So we were staying in this flea bag hotel where the bed bugs were running up our legs, and we couldn't stay there. So we walked across the street. There was this dry fountain. There was no water in it. It had 2 tiers, a lower and an upper tier. And we sat on the lower tier of the fountain. And it was New Year's Eve, 1965. And we sat there watching India go by. And at some point, Mick had decided that we should stop taking drugs. And I think we stopped taking drugs about 2 hours ago or something. And some Indian man next to us was filling this chillum and passed it on to us. So our stop taking drugs resolution didn't even last until midnight. So we sat in this fountain, and we just kind of stayed there for like a week or more. Just sat there with the Indian people that lived in the fountain. And at some point, sorry about shaking, I have Parkinson's. In the lower part of the fountain, some people lived in it, and the upper part fountain, some guy, he had like a massage thing. He had all these oils and things, and he would stretch people out and go tuck, 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 and massage them and crank their necks and adjust their spines and in the fountain. So we stayed in this fountain for like a week or so. And then we decided, we got to do something, we got to go somewhere. So the fountain people, our fountaineer friends, said, oh, you've been to the north, you haven't been to the south, go to Hyderabad. Most of them were Muslims, and they said Hyderabad is a good place to go. So we said, okay, let's go to Hyderabad. And we hitchhiked out on our way to Hyderabad. And at some point we got to Pune. And somebody picked us up hitchhiking, and he said, why do you want to go to Hyderabad? We said, we don't know. He said, no, go back to Bombay. So we said, oh, you think so? Good. We walked across the street and hitchhiked back to Bombay, back to the farm. Unbelievable. But when we were in Pune, Mick remembered that Steve Simon had said this is where this Mayor Baba lives. So he said, hey, let's go see this guy. So we asked at the hotel, at the Green Hotel at the train station, where does this Mayor Baba live? And he said, oh, just down here on Bun Garden Road. He put us in a rickshaw, and we went to drive to Guru Prasad. And I remember thinking, wow, he has a palace. That was very unusual for an Indian sadhu or holy man to have a palace. So we walked in the garden, and some man came toward us. We asked him if he was Mayor Baba, and he said, no, I'm just a gardener. And he said, Mayor Baba lives about 90 miles north of here in Ahmednagar. He only comes here in the summer. And this was still January. But you need to go to the Mayor Baba Center in Pune. So he put us in a rickshaw, and they took us to the Mayor Baba Center. And I was already like, the guy has a center, he has a palace. This is very unusual. So we walked into the Pune Baba Center, and it was a painting of Baba in the front. And it's the first image that we saw of Baba. And I remember Mick saying, he shaves. Indian holy men, they don't normally shave. And I said, and look at that nose. So as we're standing there, this man comes out and introduces himself as Ramakrishna. And we said we came to meet Mayor Baba, and he said, well, he's in very strict seclusion, so what you need to do is I send him a message that you want to see him, and you come back in 3 days for the answer. So he said, okay, you do that. But 3 days later, we had already left for Bombay and sat in the fountain again. We never went back to see what the answer would be. And then from the fountain, we decided we should go to Delhi, because we knew Delhi and we'd been to Delhi, and this gentleman is looking for something, I think. Oh, okay. And so when we were in Delhi, the whole thing was just like we had no more aim, no more goal, no more anything. We were just drifting around like ants on a rock. It was just amazing. And so in Delhi, and Mick was starting to get weird, actually. He was just out of mood and difficult to get along with and all. So in Delhi, he said, I want to go see this Meher Baba. I said, what are you talking about? It's 800 miles the other way. In part of India I don't like at all. And if you want a guru, let's go to Rishikesh or Hardwar, find a guru. In fact, we found a place in Bengal where you could learn how to levitate in 6-week course. That seemed like reasonable for me. So no, Mick said he wants to see this Meher Baba. And okay, so we sent a telegram to Meher Baba Ahmednagar, that's all we knew, and asked that we wanted to come see him. And sorry. And Baba wrote back to us. And he said, do not come to Ahmednagar. If you feel my presence, my love blessings to you, feel my presence wherever you are, or something like that. I forgot the exact words. And he gave us the address of Wasdeo Kane, Baba Lava in Delhi. And to me, I mean, this was already okay. He said, no, don't come, that's good. And so we went to see Mr. Kane, and Mr. Kane explained to us that what we should do is write to Baba, tell him all about ourselves. And he gave me a copy of God Speaks and a couple of discourses, individual pamphlets of discourses. And I could not read English at all. I mean, Mick and I, we spoke German to each other. And so Mr. Kane said, you write to him and tell him all about yourself. Now, this is really Mick's thing, not mine. And Mick wrote to Baba and told him that we were in India and we'd been traveling and all this sort of stuff. And we'd been taking drugs, because the only thing we knew from Steve Simon was that he did not like drugs. So Mick told him we were taking drugs. And we told him that we wanted to go to the United States, but we were unable to go because of my visa situation, of my police record. And Baba wrote back and he said, you try. I mean, he wrote back nice things like love blessings and all this, but he said, you try. So we went to the American consulate in American embassy in Delhi and asked for a immigration visa for me, because being married to an American, you could not come here as a tourist. You had to immigrate. And immigration visas are difficult to get, and they take a long time. And they forgot to ask me for my police record. And I had an immigration visa to the United States within 2 weeks. Unbelievable, unheard of. And now I was excited. We could go to the United States. That was very exciting to me. And when we wrote to Baba again, and Mick, in fact, said something like, you saw, Steve Simon had written us a letter somewhere, and he did tell us that he had seen Baba. And so Mick wrote and said, you saw Steve Simon, I think you should see me. Us. Unbelievable. And Baba wrote back and said, no, he's in very strict seclusion. And he told us to stop taking drugs, and we actually stopped taking drugs then and there. But it had nothing to do with him, it was our own willpower. And so then we wrote back to him, and it's the first time we didn't ask to see him. We just wrote back to say, we're leaving, bye, whatever. And then we got a letter from Adi saying that my Baba wants to see us for 5 minutes only on March 7th, 1966 at 9:30 in the morning. And Mick was ecstatic, and I was like, oh, come on. 800 miles the other way. I wanted to go to the United States. I didn't want to go back, run around India, but it made Mick happy. So it seemed like that's the thing we should do. And so Adi wanted to know how will we get, on which train. And so we were hitchhikers. We hitchhiked all the way to Manmad. And we took the train that Adi wanted us to meet from Manmad to Ahmednagar. And when we got to Ahmednagar, Adi picked us up at the train. And he was all anxious because Baba said 9 o'clock. I said, no, he didn't. He said 9:30. Yeah, but he changed it to 9. I said, okay, he changes it to 9, what are we supposed to do? So Adi packed us up in, it was Holi, the Indian festival where they throw powder, red powder and stuff at each other. And we were worried that this would happen, that somebody would throw powder on us, but they didn't. And Adi took us in this car, this big blue Chevy, 1947 Chevy, beautiful car. And we drove out of Ahmednagar to go to Meherana. And he rolled down the windows, and the dust was pouring in. The road was not paved in those days. And he said, I love the country air with all this dust pouring. And entering Meherana, one entered through the green gate that's there. There was all the stuff on the side wasn't there yet. And so he stopped the car, and he said he's going to go in, see Baba, and we should wait here. And he put us on a bench. There was no porch or anything. It was just back of Mandalay Hall there. And we sat on a bench, and said, you wait. And Mick said to me, well, what are we going to do? Wow, we should brought a coconut, because that's what you do. You surrender a coconut at the feet of the master as like giving your mind or something. So, well, we didn't have a coconut, sorry. And so we sat there, and but one person came up to us. He was an old man with a beard and a cane, and he sat next to us. He said, Amrika? We said, Amrika. And that was Baidul, Baba's must hunter. And it's the only one that we met of the Mandalay at this point. And so then when Vic and I discussing what are we going to do? Who knows? We just go. And so we went in. Adi came and said, come in. And we walked in the door into Mandalay Hall at Meherana, and Baba's chair was to the right. And Adi said we're not to bow down or touch his feet or anything. So as Vic walked in first, and I walked in next. And Baba went like this. So it was obvious that he wanted us to come over and hug him, which Mick did, and then I hugged him, and then he motioned us to sit down. We sat against the wall, kind of under where the clock is at Meherana, and Erich was sitting to my left. And in the middle of the room on the floor was a group of men. And I remember thinking, what are all these people? I don't know what I thought we were going. At some point, Mr. Kane had told us that Baba did not speak. We did know that he was silent. And I don't know what I thought, how we were going to communicate, but I remember thinking, what are all these people here? And I noticed that one of the men was Western. It was Francis Brabazon. But Baba never introduced us to them or anything. And as soon as we sat down, he started gesturing, and his voice was coming from Erich. Baba would gesture and Erich would speak. And he said, how did you sleep last night? And we said, oh, fine, Baba, fine. We were on this train, we didn't sleep at all. But we didn't, yeah. And he asked Mick if he was okay, because Mick was very thin. And Mick said, no, this is my normal weight. And Baba said, you should eat more chapatis. Made the sign like this. And at some point, he got very serious and he said, have you stopped taking drugs? And we said, yes. And then he was happy. He smiled because we had obeyed him. And it was just amazing to see him smile. Now, I was just there, watching all this. I didn't really think about anything unusual or anything. But in looking at him, he was, first of all, he was much smaller than I thought he was. This chair was, he was sort of sinking. He was not a big man. And his hands would hang off the edge. And he would make these motions with his hands that were really fascinating. And his feet were on a cushion, and they were absolutely beautiful. His feet were just perfect. And his eyes, he looked around the room. He wouldn't focus on anything for a long time. He looked around the room for a lot. And apparently we made him happy by having obeyed him, by stopping to take drugs. And he asked, who do you think I am? Who do you take me to be? And Mick said, I take you to be the living Christ. I remember thinking, what? Wait, I didn't get it, kind of what that meant. But Mick had been reading God Speaks and these pamphlets of the discourses. And so he obviously had arrived at this opinion. And I remember thinking, it was weird, but I thought, how come he never told me that? But then Baba looked at me and said, and you? And I said, I have absolutely no idea. And so he seemed to be happy with what Mick said, but I obviously needed some kind of explanation because I didn't know. I said I didn't know. So he looked at me and he said, I'm God in human form. And I know this because I constantly experience it. And just like you're a woman, you never ask yourself, am I a woman or a man? Through constant experience, you're a woman. Like that, I, through constant experience, know that I'm God in human form. And there's just no way to describe what it feels like when God looks at you and says he's God. There's just no way around it. That is who he is. And the authority with which he said it was so unquestionable. So I sat there in front of God, which, how one can understand that, I have no idea. It just completely blew my mind. I didn't know what to think or how to. I just looked at him. And then I started to cry because that's all I could do. And because it was holy, I had worn a black sweater because I was thinking people would throw this powder at us. And then, so I wore a black sweater. And as I'm sitting there in front of God in human form, I was crying. My nose was running. And I had nothing. Our stuff was all outside. I didn't have a tissue or anything. And so I had to wipe my nose on my sleeve, which left these silver streaks up on the black sweater. So I'm sitting in front of God, snotting up my sleeve. That's basically what was happening. And there were some other things, conversation. He asked if we had any children, and we had decided that we didn't want children. But in India, when people ask if you want to have children, you say no. They think you're weird. So I would always say maybe later, but Mick always would say no. So Baba said, "Do you want children?" And Mick said no, and I said maybe later. And he said, "Who am I to please?" Because he seemed to think this was a conflict of, and he said, "Ushi, if you love Mick, you'd ask me to please him. And if you love Ushi, you'd ask me to please her." And I didn't say, I was sitting there crying. To me, I was done for pretty much. And Mick said something. He said, perhaps, the Baba should only please himself, and perhaps we can't love you the way you're to be loved, but we can promise to obey you 100%. And this went over like a lead balloon. Baba did not even blink that he even heard it. It was just amazing. It was like, yeah, okay, just went right on with whatever happened next. And he asked if we had gone to his birthday party in Delhi, which we had done with Mr. Kane. But it was sort of weird because it was all in Hindi, but we did see a motion picture of him at the birthday party in Delhi. It's the only time, the first time that we had seen him in moving picture. And so we told him that we had gone to Delhi. And he said, "How will you get back to the United States? How will you do that?" We told him we would be hitchhiking, and said that was okay, but he wanted us to leave immediately. He did not want us even to spend the night in Ahmednagar. He wanted us to leave right away. Hey guys. And he said that we should go to the West, and that the highest spiritual work to be done in the world today was to dissuade young people from taking drugs. And he also asked us if we had read Stay with God and God Speaks. And Mick said we had read God Speaks, we'd never heard of Stay with God, but he didn't introduce us to Francis, who was sitting right there. And said no, we didn't hear about that. And he said that those were the two most important books to read, Stay with God and God Speaks. And Adi was to give us a copy of it. And he said we should take the love that he has given us and share it as freely as he gave it to us. And we should kiss him and leave. And so we got up and kissed him, and I got up and kissed him, and he kissed me, and we walked out. And the one thing I remember forever seems what he smelled like in the end, when I said goodbye to him. It wasn't like perfume or flowers or roses or anything. It was just a smell like a newborn baby of someone. There's a clean, innocent smell, like literally like a newborn baby. It's very amazing. So we walked out and we sat out there with Adi for a minute. And this woman came up and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, you can leave me alone." That was Goher. I didn't know anybody, I didn't know them, and I was so blown away by having met God that I just couldn't possibly deal with anyone. So Adi took us to his office, and Baba sent a bicycle messenger. And Baba asked if we needed money. Adi is to give us money. We said, no, we don't need money. We had enough money from our sale in Japan and all. But when you think of it, he offered us money. And so then we were supposed to leave India as soon as possible. And we hitchhiked. We were going to go overland. And the Pakistani border was supposed to be open, but then it wasn't open and they wouldn't let us into Pakistan. So we had to sit in India for weeks on end trying to leave, until eventually we took a flight to Afghanistan and hitchhiked to Germany and went to New York. And how am I doing on time?
Lunch is at 12:30, so you can stop and we can go through.
Well, once we came to the United States, we did what Baba wanted us to do. We taught young people out of taking drugs. We were kind of like the holy rollers. And I was going to tell the rest of the story this afternoon. So. Here this morning. No, good. So I don't have to repeat myself. So where were we? Yes, we had met Meher Baba, and then we went to the United States. And we settled in Santa Barbara, and we had a house that we rented, and underneath was sort of a garage-like thing, and we let people stay there that wanted to come and stay there. And a lot of people sort of came by, and we taught them about Baba, and we told them the evils of drugs and the wonders of Meher Baba, and we were sort of holy rollers in a way, because people were attracted by that we would come and they would come and stay with us. In fact, there were a couple of people that are still Baba lovers today that came by our house in Santa Barbara. Ron Ormerod is one of them. And Jerry Paulson was another one, but he passed away. And so I was wandering around out there. So here we were in Santa Barbara, and we lived by selling, we imported beads from Ghana, and we also imported Lucknow kurtas from Baba's brother Jal. He would send them to us, and we would sell them to the hippie stores in Santa Barbara. This is 1966, so the hippies were heavy, and after a while, Robert Dreyfus showed up, and he was on his way to Hawaii, where he wanted to go to school. I forgot to say that when we met with Baba, we had a lot of correspondence with him, and when we went to New York, Baba told us to meet Fred and Ella Winterfeld and Robert Dreyfus. So this was something that Baba had asked us to meet him. And so Robert came to Santa Barbara to go to Hawaii, and Mick and Robert sat there and they talked about the road, being on the road. And they talked more and more about being on the road, to a point where they decided that really what we need to do is we need to discourage the young people that were traveling across Asia like we used to, that they should be the ones that we need to stop from taking drugs, not in fact the hippies of Santa Barbara. And I knew that this was not what I wanted to do. I knew that this is not what we should be doing, because Baba told us to go to America and turn people off of drugs. But Robert and Mick were so convincing that they wrote a letter to Baba and asked him, told him that what they really want to do is turn people on the road of drugs. That they are our brothers on the road, and we could relate to them. And I did not want to go. I had no intention to go back on the road, but I didn't kind of want to lose face, and so I signed the letter with them. And we sent the letter off to Baba. And Baba wrote back and he said that I have no objections. And we also got a letter from Alan Cohen, who said that this is all wrong. You do what Baba tells you to do. If you then tell him you want to do something else, he may say yes, but that's not how you deal with things. Mick got very upset that Alan Cohen had these ideas. But anyway, so we have no objections. Mick and Robert saw that as Baba's not only blessings, but it got turned into, we have his order to go back on the road. I don't know how we managed to get this in our mind, but we did. And I was crying. I said, I don't want to go. And they said, why did you sign the letter? So anyway, then we got a lot of other mail from Baba, and he said that he did remind us that he had asked us to go there and be there and do this drug work. But he said that if we have sold our things and are ready to go, then we should go. And actually the letters are all in my book, in case you all want to see the letters from Baba. I put them in my book. And so not having any objections, or at some point he said it's immaterial if you stay or go. I mean, we did not get the message at all, obviously. This is not cool. So we sold everything. We packed our dog. We had a dog. Packed our dog in the car. We drove to New York. We sold our car in New York. We put the dog on the airplane. We flew to Frankfurt. And we were ready to roll back on the road. And when we got to Frankfurt, Robert came. He stopped in Amsterdam. And then Robert met us in Frankfurt. And we bought a Volkswagen bus. And our first victim was Tom Hamilton. He was Mick's brother. And Tom Hamilton was addicted to, I think, everything. And so Tom Hamilton came to Frankfurt to go with us, but he had to be clean. We told him that he couldn't be on drugs. So at my mother's apartment house, he was lying there kicking his habit. It was unbelievable. My mother kept saying, "What's wrong with this guy?" And so then Tom managed to get clean, and we bought this Volkswagen bus. And so it was a panel bus, it didn't have any windows. And the back, the engine is in the back. So Mick and Robert built this piece of wood out the back, and that was the top where Mick and myself and my dog slept. And underneath it is where Robert and Tom slept. And we took off in the winter. It was starting to get winter. And we were in constant correspondence with Baba. We told him everything, where we are and all this. And we got to the first night Robert drove, and he pulled over, and he had parked on top of a pass in the Alps in some giant snowdrift for the night. The thing about this Volkswagen bus that was interesting is it rained in the bus because it was metal and it didn't have any lining, and so the condensation would gather and it actually would rain in there. Unbelievable. So then we were going to go to Istanbul, and we went via Bulgaria, and in Bulgaria at the border they actually wouldn't let us in because Mick and Robert were hippies and had long hair, and they would not let us into Bulgaria. They said we were dirty. And Mick, of course, got into an argument with them, saying, "Well, I had to shower much before you did," or something. But anyway, so we wrote to Baba. We told him that we were turned away from the Bulgarian border. He thought that was funny. Now, once we were on the road, and we were these holy rollers, everybody we met, we talked about Baba and the evils of drugs. And Baba was very supportive then of us. We got a lot of text letters back from him, and he was really very supportive of what we were doing. And in Istanbul, we lost Tom because Tom ran into a heroin addict that we knew from before, and Tom left with him, so that was the end of Tom. And he could keep straight. And then we had heard that in Kuwait, you get Arabs don't give blood, and if you donate blood, you get like $200 or something. So we said, "Hey, let's go to Kuwait." So we drove from Istanbul to Kuwait, and we were in Jerusalem and in Bethlehem over the Christmas, and we sort of parked the the bus outside of at the Qumran caves outside of the Dead Sea. And I remember we were doing our laundry. I was washing our laundry, and Robert walked by and he dropped his laundry next to me. He said, "While you're at it." No, that didn't exactly work. So Mick gave him kind of a lesson on how to do his laundry. And see, on the road, there are certain places there are certain roads where the hippie trail, whatever you want to call it, where people would travel a certain place, and they would stay in places that you knew. Like in Istanbul, it was the Gulhani Hotel, and so you always knew where to go to meet the hippies and people who were traveling like we were. And so we were telling him all about wonders of Baba and the evil of drugs. And from Kuwait, we went back to Iran. At one point, we were going to go to Shiraz or something, I don't remember. And the road went some other way, but there was an oil pipeline on the map, So I said, hey, let's just go along the oil pipeline. We don't need to go the road. So we actually drove in this Volkswagen bus along the oil pipeline across the Persian desert instead of taking the road. We were nuts. We were totally insane. I mean, the idea that we, what if we blow more than one tire? We had one spare tire. Never occurred to us. In fact, at one point we stopped and we put gasoline in the car. We had gas can, and the dog jumped out, and we didn't notice it, and we kept driving. And then somebody in the back said, "Sita in the front?" No, she's not. So we realized that we had lost the dog in the desert. And we turned around, and the Volkswagen bus crapped out and stopped. And it was getting dark, and I did remember where we had put gas in the truck that there were 3 palm trees on one side. That's all I remembered. So Mick was trying to fix the bus, and a truck came going in this direction. So Robert and I, we stopped the bus. Of course, we couldn't speak to the Persian driver. And we just said, pointed to the desert, said woof woof or something. So he put us in the truck, and we drove looking, because by then it was dark. And then we saw Sita sitting by the side of the road, and and I looked over, and there were 3 palm trees. She had exactly sat where we had her. Amazing. So then, eventually Baba said we cannot enter India. We wanted to go see him again, of course. He said, you cannot enter India until the 1st of November, 1966. So meanwhile, it was like January. We had a lot of time. And we managed to get to Karachi. And in Karachi, Baba Adi, whoever had written to us and given us the address of Minu Karas, who was one of Baba's disciples. And we went and we stayed with Minu Karas. Well, we would sleep in the bus and at Minu's house. And then Baba wrote and said that he postponed our coming into India until the 1st of January. So we had a lot of time. So we decided that we're just going to stay. We went to Lahore, we rented a house in Lahore. We were going to stay there and wait from February to next year, January, in Lahore. And the road was that our house was on the main road to India. When you go from Pakistan to India, the Wagah border, you had to practically pass our house. And all these, and in India and Pakistan, at this time, the only people that crossed the border were Westerners, because Indians were not allowed. Pakistanis were not allowed in India. So this throng of hippies came by our house. We allowed them to stay with us. And we had big posters on the walls and some Baba pamphlets and articles, the stuff that we gave to people, that we shared with people. And the one thing that we decided was that they could take drugs in our house, because if we don't let them take drugs in our house, then they will not come. They will not want to stay there. So we were actually sitting there preaching to these guys that was getting totally stoned, and there was some young Swedish guy was shooting up morphine or whatever. Unbelievable. And then it kept getting hotter and hotter, and hotter and hotter. And eventually it was like 120 degrees. And our house was not air conditioned, of course, and it was sort of open. And we had 1 hour of water in the morning and 1 hour of water in the afternoon. But the afternoon water came out of the faucet hot because the tank was on the roof. So, and it was 120 degrees. The toilet was just a cement room with a couple of bricks that you stand on, and you pooped there, and you left it there until twice a day the sweeper came and cleaned it up. So this is how it all went. And at some point we discovered that somebody was ill, and that was Robert, because we saw that he was passing blood, and he had very bad colon problems and whatnot. So we took him to a doctor in Lahore, and we kept writing to Baba, and he wrote back, and he was very, very sweet and very kind, and wrote lovely letters to us and everything. And we were going to wait until January and then come to see him again, or so we thought. Well, Minu Karas actually told Baba that we were going to bring our dog, but we didn't know Minu had ratted us out, so we got a letter from Baba saying, and when you come, do not bring your dog. Wait a minute, how does he know that? Minu had kind of ratted us out. So then we said to Minu, why did you do that? He said, oh, it's very easy. When you go to see him, you tie the dog outside the gate, and the dog will bark, and Baba will say, what happened? Well, what is this? You'd say, well, you didn't want us to bring him, so we left him outside. Baba would say, then bring him. And so here we were in 120 degrees, and one day some guy was smoking some hash there, and one day Robert said, will you pass that thing? And then he passed it to me, and the three of us started getting stoned. And we sat there, and I mean, I don't really know how we felt, but it was just, the situation was so desperate. And so we wrote to Baba and confessed. We told him what we had done, and he wrote back, and he forgave us. He said that he's forgiven us, and it was so sweet. The letter was after the great work we had done for him, imagine. And then the next letter that came was from Adi. Meher Baba no longer entertains any personal correspondence. Boom. And that was such a shock to us, because we were in constant communication with him after we met him, and here we were just shut off. We could no longer write to him, and he would not write back to us. Then we did get another message saying that he had postponed our coming back to India indefinitely. So we're sitting in Lahore at 120 degrees, stoned, not being able to see Baba, no idea of seeing him again, and not being able to write to him and tell him about it. I mean, we had written to him once, and he had forgiven us, but we sort of hadn't stopped yet. So Robert decided that this is it, I'm getting out of here, I'm going back to Europe. And he left. And Mick and I stayed there in Lahore, and it became fairly obvious quickly that we were ill, and we both got hepatitis. Oh, Tom, Tom, we picked up Tom again in Karachi. Tom was in Karachi before we went to Lahore, and he came with us, and we cleaned him up again, and he was staying with us in Lahore. And then Tom decided to go to India because he felt that Baba's order to not come to India didn't have anything to do with him. So Tom left to go to India. And Robert left to go to Europe, and Mick and I were in Pakistan together. And Mick got so sick with hepatitis that I had to put him in the hospital, Muhammad Ali Jinnah Hospital in Lahore, where the blankets were red, and they explained that the blankets were red so you don't see the blood on the blankets. And Mick had a roommate, a guy who also had hepatitis. It was Papa Doc's son from Haiti. And so here we were. We got too sick, obviously, to smoke anymore. And Mick also got pleurisy in his lungs, and he was breathing with this like rattle. And he was so ill that eventually he weighed 87 pounds. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was kind of going around holding my liver while I was with the dog and the rickshaws and going to the hospital seeing me. So I called Minu Karas and I said, what am I going to do? And he said, bring him. So I went to the hospital, I put Mick in a wheelchair, took him to the airport, flew him to Karachi, and gave him to Minu. Here, you handle it. And Minu put Mick in his own bed, and he slept with his wife in his wife's room. And Minu Karas sat by Mick's bed pretty much day and night. And he did get better a little bit. And then the Karachi group decided that we shouldn't be continue to stay there. So they gathered money. Adi Roda Dupash and Minu and Meherji and not Meherji, Adi Ajani, and they bought us 2 airplane tickets to Istanbul. So we flew from Karachi to Istanbul. And in Istanbul, we took a train to Frankfurt. And in Frankfurt, my sister didn't want us back because we had caused all these issues before. And so she didn't want us to come back and stay there. So we rented a room in Frankfurt. Now, meanwhile, after I had been arrested before in Frankfurt, the police had decided that I had continued to deal drugs after, and so I was wanted again for that for a couple of years ago. So I was very concerned that the police is going to catch me, but we stayed in Frankfurt. We got some goofy job and hung out for a while. And then we got one of those kiosks where you sell beer and wine and newspapers and candy. We ran one of those things for a while. And we left the dog in Lahore with a Quaker, a couple of Quakers. And when we were in Frankfurt, we decided we wanted the dog back. So the Quaker couple actually sent the dog back to Frankfurt to us. So we're there with the dog. And Adi had said that when you have a change of address, you could write that to him. So we wrote to Adi and we told him that we were in Frankfurt now. And we asked for permission to write to Baba. And Baba gave us permission to write to him again. And we sort of thought that maybe it's the last chance we ever going to have. And so we packed this letter just full of all these things that we still wanted to tell him, that we hadn't stopped smoking dope in Lahore and all these personal things. And Mick put in there that he was upset that Alan Cohen said what he said a year ago and all this stuff. And Baba wrote back, and I think there was like 14 points. And Baba answered every one of the points. And And it was, Baba does not want you to take any more drugs, and capital underlined. It sort of got like serious. He wasn't as sweet about it as he was originally. And so we stayed in Frankfurt. And then I wanted to go back to the United States because I did not want to stay in Frankfurt, because I thought the police were going to eventually come after me, which they did, and I had to go and be interviewed and all this sort of stuff. And at one point, Mick's friend in the United States sent us the money to fly back to the United States. And one of these people at this kiosk that we were working, he had some surefire thing of playing roulette in Wiesbaden. So Mick and he went to Wiesbaden to play roulette, play the guy's surefire thing, and Mick blew the entire money that we had to fly to New York. So there we were again. And meanwhile the police was breathing down my back, and it was not a great scene. So then we met this American who had finished with the military, flown to Karachi, bought a bunch of hash, and come back to Frankfurt. And he wanted to go to Amsterdam to sell some of it, and he didn't trust anyone else, so he gave us the rest of like a couple of pounds or whatever it was to keep for him till he comes back from Amsterdam. Well, he never came back because he was arrested in Amsterdam and deported back to the United States. So we were in Frankfurt with this guy's couple of pounds of hashish. And, well, what to do? We started selling it. And we sold it until we had enough money to go to the United States. We bought airplane tickets from Luxembourg to New York on Icelandic airline, and we flew to New York. And we had 8 ounces of hash left, and that was, we didn't have any more money. That was going to be the only money we have once we get to New York. So that was taped to my stomach on the airplane, and then the airplane didn't have a landing gear. And we flew over the 5 boroughs of New York for hours, using up gasoline while they were ready to foam down the runway. So here we are, flying over New York with a hash taped to my stomach. Anyway, eventually the landing gear came down, and we did land, and Tom met us at the airport, and we sold this. I think Tom sold it for us, and we took the money and we came to Berkeley. We got a drive away in New York. They had these New York taxi cabs that you could use. They would pay the gasoline, and so we drove away this cab and came to Berkeley. Robert was in Berkeley, but he wanted to go to some Zen place in Colorado or some. So we took Robert's apartment, and Robert went to Colorado, and then he came back, and we lived in Berkeley, and we got involved in doing drug work, and Alan Cohen had this outfit, the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation or something, and I worked with him. Robert and I, we shared a job at John F. Kennedy High School in Richmond, California, which was 80% black, and we were the in-house drug counselors. and then Baba announced that he was going to see us all in 69 Darshan. And it was very, very exciting, because we were going to see him again. and we all got jobs to work and make the money to go to darshan. And Alexandra and I were working in this place, and Mick was working there, and we all saved our money, and then the 31st of January came and Baba dropped the body. And this was so shocking to us. I mean, I could never imagine living without him, even though we weren't able to write anymore to him, but just that he was there. And then he wasn't there anymore. It was just, to me, very sad. But the Sufis decided to keep the flight because Baba had invited us, we should go. And so we did fly to Bombay with a Sufi group in April of 1969, and I do remember when we came across, we were somewhere over Vietnam when Mick told me that he had quit his job. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, yeah, I worked to make money to go to darshan, and I did that, so." Nice, way to go. So I had continued my job. So when we came back, and the darshan was just amazing. It was just amazing because we had never met any of the mandali, except for Adi. When we met Baba, I never even turned to look at Erich, who was talking. And then they were all there, and Mani and Mera. It was just unbelievable. And so then we came back from the 69 darshan, and I was working, Mick was not. He was parking cars at the Claremont Hotel on Saturday nights or something. And I don't know, one thing led to another. Eventually, in November of 1969, I left Mick and moved out. And for whatever reason, I don't really want to badmouth him, so I don't want to really say, but you could probably imagine what the main reason was. And so then my life began, just living my own life, And we did drug work, and worked with Alan Cohen and with Robert, and Mick went to chiropractic school in Davenport, Iowa, and life went on. So anyway, do you have any questions? Anyone? No questions? Yeah?
If you had it to do over again, would you do anything different? I think the answer probably no.
Well, I didn't really want to leave Santa Barbara. I mean, we were very successful. Baba was so hot then, and so on fire, talking to people about him. He was still in the body, and we were in constant communication with him. Some guy came to our house and said that his guru said he shouldn't sleep in the same room with his dog. So we wrote to Baba, "Baba, should we sleep in the same room with our dog?" Baba wrote back and said, "Of course, I have no objections." Stuff like that, And we were really, I was happy there. And I think the whole idea of going back on the road was a mistake, but yet it happened, and we did, and I did, and it was certainly an amazing year being back on the road, So it's hard to say. I'm not sure. Anyone else?
Your editor.
Yes?
Didn't you become a private eye at one point?
Yeah, I did after, yeah. Yeah, my drug work actually, through Alan, I got this job. The Johns Hopkins University studied the effect of methadone on people. And that was a huge methadone study by the federal government did. And what you had to do, the job was that you had to take names of the methadone maintenance place and find these people, interview them. You had this book of, I don't know, 100 questions or something, and you paid them $25, whatever it was. And they were very intimate questions, like how do you spot your habit and all this kind of stuff. And people would answer the questions because they wanted the $25 at the end. And I got so good at finding these people that they only gave me the jobs of those that the others couldn't find. I had some sense of it. Somehow I was able to find these people. It was a wild job, unbelievable. The only way to get off of methadone at the time was to get back on heroin. And so I interviewed a lot of people. I interviewed one guy in the hospital. He died a couple of days later. I went to prison and interviewed people in prison and prostitutes, and unbelievable. And I did that for a long while. It was like almost a year, I think. And by the end of this job, when it was over, I had lost empathy for people on drugs. I mean, it was like, whatever, do it, knock yourself out. I no longer really had that desire to do that kind of work. So now what am I going to do? The only other thing, I had a degree in accounting from Germany before we left originally, and I didn't want to do accounting, and I did want to do drug work, so I thought, what can I do? And being a private investigator came to my mind because I was so good at finding the people that in the methadone program. So I took the San Francisco Yellow Pages and I started at A, and I called every private eye in town and I said, I know I can do it, I know I'm good, I don't care if you pay me, I want a job. And so somebody hired me to be a private investigator. But I didn't like him and he didn't like me, so for a month later or so, we parted ways. His firm was famous for a woman had been on a cable car in San Francisco, and she fell off the cable car and turned into a nymphomaniac. And this was the lawsuit against the city and county of San Francisco. And so then I quit his job, or he fired me, I don't know, whichever came first. And I went back to the Yellow Pages and I got another job as private eye. And with them, I stayed for some years. And I did that for 4 years, something, 5 years maybe, I don't remember. And that was exciting. We were defense investigators. Our job, we were hired by attorneys to find that the good guy wasn't actually really the good guy. And so we would follow people who were in car accidents, rolling into court in wheelchairs. Then we take photos of them playing tennis and stuff like that. And my forte was finding people. I would always be able to find people. It was so strange. I don't know how I did that, but I remember I was looking for somebody once who was a witness in a case, and I knew everything about her. I knew her car, I knew her license plate, I knew everything about her. And I'm stopped at a red light on Dolores Street, and she's in front of me. Unbelievable. There was another case, however, which I was looking for this guy, and oh man, I did a brilliant piece of investigation. I talked to the corner stores and I finally found him. I said, man, you're very difficult to find. He said, what are you talking about? I'm in the phone book. And we did a case for J.D. Salinger. He had short stories that had been published in Look magazine or something back in the 50s, maybe the 40s, I don't remember. And someone was publishing them in a bootleg book and selling the books on Telegraph Avenue. And Salinger's attorney hired us to find that man who was publishing these books. And the bookshops on Telegraph Avenue were all dealing with him through a post office box. So I sat in front of this post office box on Durant Street for days, waiting for this guy to come. Well, finally he did show up, and I followed him. And he lived in some rooming house, and I moved in and I rented a room, and we found that he had the printing press was in the basement, and we got the whole thing undone.
I have a question, Ursula. What happened to your dog?
Oh, the dog was left in Lahore with the Quakers, and when we were in Frankfurt, we had the dog. We flew her back to Frankfurt from Lahore. Then we took her with us to Berkeley, and she lived with us in Berkeley. And then one of the in Berkeley, we lived on Channing Way. This is 1969, 68, 69, 68, I think it was. And somebody stole her and took her, and we found out that somebody put her in the car and drove her to Boston. And I went to the Berkeley police because I had the guy's phone number, and they said it's not a crime because she has no value. She was a mutt. She wasn't some purebred dog which had value, so there was not a crime. Oh, another thing happened while I was working. How did this happen? Yeah, my dog, then I had another dog. I had an Irish setter that Robert and Mick had bought for me. And my Irish setter had two litters. One was 19 and one was 16, I think, dogs. Purebred, pedigreed Irish setters. And so the newspaper came and the television came. Everybody came to my house to film the puppies and the dog. And that photo was put in the San Francisco Chronicle. And for some reason, the Chronicle wrote underneath, Ursula Hamilton of 1822 Berkeley Way has had all these puppies. And apparently the newspaper went to prisons. And so I started getting this mail from prisoners because I was in the photo. And I guess for them to get a photo with a name and an address is not so common. So all these prisoners were writing to me, and it was amazing. So Rick and I decided that we answer every one of the prisoners' letters by sending them Baba drug for information. There was a pamphlet out called God in a Pill, and we sent that to them. And well, one day, the Berkeley police knocked on my door. And I opened the door and he said, "Where is he?" And I said, "Where's who?" Well, one of those inmates had run away from San Quentin, and they went through his file, and he had my address as one of his friends because he had written to me. And so the cops came and they thought I was hiding him. And I explained to him that I definitely wasn't hiding him. And it was scary. But yeah. So when I was a private eye, I also carried a gun. It was wild times, wild. And then
Just one question, I'm curious. Did you not have to be certified to be a private detective in those days? Or did you get a certification?
No,
Did you have to?
no, you had to work under somebody who was certified. My boss was certified, yeah. And well, we had fun. Unbelievable. Driving was the most dangerous part. You know, if you follow somebody and he makes it through the yellow light, you got to run the red light. Jerry Nielsen, my boss, and I, we were following somebody once and we made a U-turn on the freeway. I'm just nuts, crazy stuff, just crazy stuff. Then Ed Van Buskirk and Mick Hamilton were at the Davenport, Iowa, at the college, the chiropractic college, and they became chiropractors. And they came back to Berkeley, and Ed and I became friends. At some point, while I was a private eye, I thought I needed religion in my life because the Baba meetings had we used to run them and we used to have all sorts of Baba meetings and stuff, but then they had kind of gone to be done by Roger Blewett and his people who were sort of not that interesting to me, so I thought, I became a Sufi because somehow I thought that would bring me nearer to Baba, because being a private eye was definitely not a Baba sort of thing. And so I became a Sufi, and then I married Ed Van Buskirk, and then both Ed and Murshida Ivy Dus started working on me that this being a private eye was not good. I shouldn't be that. It's a terrible job, very dangerous, all this sort of stuff. And they just worked on me until I had to quit. And that was really one thing I was sorry about forever. I mean, I really enjoyed that job. So then I said to Ivy Dus, what am I supposed to do? And she said, well, you don't want to do drug work, you don't want to do accounting, you've traveled a lot, become a travel agent. And so I became a travel agent. And I had immediately 500 customers. Because Murshida says, we now have a travel agent. Everybody comes to use me. In fact, I knew so little about it that I sent Rick Chaps to Charlotte instead of Charleston and stuff like that. Oh, and Eric Weiss, yeah. Eric Weiss. Eric Weiss, I sold him a ticket on Japan Airline to India, and he carried Joseph Harb's ashes to India. And then on the way back, he was hijacked. And he was on this plane for 5 days, hijacked by some Arab PLO, whatever, I don't know, whatever it was.
It was the Japanese Red Army.
The Japanese Red Army, that's right. It was Japan Airline. And he sat on that plane for 5 days in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And in fact, while he was sitting on the plane, and all the attention of the government of Bangladesh was on that plane, the army decided to have a coup and take over. So these tanks were rolling around the airfield, unbelievable. But eventually they let him go in Damascus, I think.
What year was that?
I married Ed in 1977, so I think in 1978
That guy, when he was in Arizona, all he did was sleep at Monterey Hall.
Right,
It was a big joke.
that's right, that's right.
He gets on the plane, he can't sleep.
Yeah. Mani told me that he would sit there in Mandley Hall with his feet out. And that's not what you do, you know. And it's just not proper way to be. And so Mani would say, "Excuse me, do you have a bad back?" And he would say, "No, no, I'm comfortable." He'd lie there in Mandalay Hall with his feet sticking out. And then when I went to India, Mani told me, "See, that's why he was hijacked. That's why he had to sit on the airplane." Very possible. You never know. Very possible. So one thing excuse me?
Go ahead. Well, you also have a friendship with, well, Ivy Deuce and with Phyllis Frederick.
Yeah. That's right. Baba said, when we lived in Santa Barbara, Baba said, "Meet Phyllis Frederick." So we went to LA and we met Phyllis. And Phyllis became a good friend of mine until she passed away. I was very fond of Phyllis. And in fact, Baba had told Phyllis that she will meet her children from past lives in this life. And apparently she remembered my being her daughter at some point. She had these visions, you know. And yeah, Phyllis. So I put these, there were people who wanted to go to India but were not feeling, especially Sufis, they were not feeling comfortable going to India by themselves. So I put these groups together. And twice a year, 15 or 16 people, when I had 15, I got a free ticket. So for me, my ticket was only 25% anyway, because I was a travel agent. So Ed was the free ticket, and the two of us took this group to India twice a year. And in fact, I think there's some people here who went on my group at some point. And
how did you get involved hiring physicians for prisons?
oh, that comes after, it comes later. Right now we're still being Sufis. And so taking these groups to India was like, oh my God, like herding sheep in some case. Unbelievable. Yeah, there was one woman, she was a Berkeley Baba woman, I can't remember her name. We were in Hong Kong on Air India, ready to leave on a 747 for Bombay, and she was missing. We couldn't find her. And I actually talked to the pilot. I told him, "You cannot leave. We cannot leave her here." And I stopped the Air India 747 from leaving Hong Kong because she was missing. Eventually she comes walking down the thing, and I said, "Where have you been shopping?" Amazing, amazing. Somebody else was on the plane when we were taking off in San Francisco, taking these pills. I said, "What are you taking pills for?" She said, "Antibiotics." I said, "Why? What's wrong with you?" "Oh, preventative antibiotics." She was sick the whole time. Unbelievable. But at the same time, doing this, we got very close to the Mandali, because I would bring these people and Mani and Mera and Erich, and it was very nice. It was very nice to be able to do that. And so then, what happened?
You say something about living in Berkeley and Channing Way.
Oh yeah, Channing Way. Oh yeah, oh my God. Channing Way, the 2012 and a half Channing Way was our address. And Mick and I were staying in a small cottage in the back, not cottage, like small apartment in the back. And in the front building was this place that apparently wasn't high enough so you wasn't enough to be able to rent it. So somebody had dug down the floor but left it that way. So there was just dirt on the ground. We asked the landlord, and he rented it to us for $25 a month. And we turned the place into Meherana, which was a Baba center that we built, and everybody helped, and we got cement, put a cement floor in, and Bob was still in the body. We sent him Polaroid photos of it, Meherana. And the block, this block on Channing Way was known as the block. And the SLA lived on the block, as did the weathermen at the time. They were called the weathermen, and the White Panther Party. And they were all absolute revolutionaries. And it's 1968, 69. And we had these block meetings, and I remember going to one of the block meetings, and they were planning to bomb the Bank of America on Telegraph Avenue. I said, I don't think I want to be here, guys. Yeah, I had a green card. I was not going to be doing that. So that was an amazing block. And Adi came with Meherji, and we made this enormous pots of dal and rice and fed, and all the revolutionaries came, and they and all the Baba people. In front, in the house in front, lived Robert and Robbie Basho and Scott McCaig, and next to us was Cindy Campbell, and there were so many Baba. Dick Anthony lived there for a while. The two buildings were full of Baba people. And then there was this couple, John and Helen Meyer, and they lived next door. They were not Baba people, so we turned them into Baba people. We did. Meyer Sound, I don't know if you know. So then, what happened? Then I became a Sufi. Yes, I was a Sufi. And that is a whole thing that I'm not sure I can get into in detail now. But I was, after being a Sufi for a couple of years, there was a change of guard, and James Mackay came, and I was not enamored with him at all. And I went to India, and we talked to the Mandali about it, and this whole thing blew up, and we left, Ed and I both left the Sufi order because of it. And then I had my son Eric, who was born very premature. I was in India on one of those trips that I took the people to India, and I decided that I was probably pregnant, and I told Mara that. And she turned around and she prayed to Baba that everything was going to be fine. And then I told Mani that I was pregnant. She said, how long? And I said, 5 days. So, oh my God, we don't tell anybody we're pregnant after 5 days. But I was, and I went to Germany and I had a test, and I was in fact pregnant. And Mara would send me these letters. I was allowed to walk uphill but not downhill. She was so sweet. She was so sweet. And Eric was born very well. First, I had what seemed to be a miscarriage. And I went to the doctor, and everybody decided I had a miscarriage. And then they discovered that there was a heartbeat. So there were two of them. One kind of fell out early, and Eric stayed in there for a little while longer. But I was 25 weeks pregnant when he was born, at 1 pound 11 ounces. And then he lost weight. When he was 2 weeks old, he was 1 pound 5 ounces. When he was a month old, he was back to his birth weight. And it was unbelievable. His head was the size of an egg, his legs were like this. And we sent a cable to the Mandali that he had been born on February 2nd, which was doing Amatiti. And we didn't hear back. It was like, okay, it was Amatiti, they're busy, you know. And one night the phone rang. It was Baba's sister Mani. She called and she said, Mara wants to know how the baby is doing. did you get our cable? And we didn't get the cable. And Mani called, wanted to know how, because Mara wanted to know. So then eventually the doctors decided that given his gestational age and his birth weight, he was the best they'd ever seen. He grew up to be just absolutely fantastic. And so Mara wanted to meet him. And when he was 3, she asked us to bring him, and Goa was all upset. No, you can't do that. Oh my God, bring him. But Mara said, nothing doing, bring him. So we did bring him to meet Mara. And I remember sitting with her, and I told her that I thought that the reason of his good development was because she asked Baba. And I expected her to say, oh, no, it's all Baba. She said, absolutely, that's right. She knew exactly her power. If she asked Baba, Baba would then grant her that wish. And she had asked Baba to make, because, I mean, Baba wanted her to be happy. So if Eric hadn't lived, she would be happy, right? Because she was so involved in him. So that was amazing. Yeah. And then eventually I got this job. I didn't work for 14 years. When Eric was 14, I decided I needed a job, and so I got this job. And the job was bringing doctors and psychiatrists to the prison, because what happened was that under Reagan, in his infinite wisdom, he built all these prisons in places where there's no there, up down Highway 5 and 99, and so on. And so no doctor in their right mind, except this one, would work in like Corcoran or somewhere. It's 2 hours drive to Bakersfield for your children, so they couldn't get doctors that wanted to live there and work there. So the Department of Correction Healthcare was put in federal receivership, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals took over, and they issued a thing that we have to find doctors, that the CDCR has to find doctors at whatever possible, at whatever cost. And when I saw whatever cost, I said to my boss, we could do this. And so we had at one point 200 doctors working for us. They were independent contractors. They were not state employees. And I remember I had 200 doctors. And this one guy, I asked for his timesheets, and he said, oh, I don't have timesheets. I was on vacation. I said, where'd you go? He said, India. I said, really? Where? He said, oh, small town, you'd never know, Ahmednagar. That was Tom Haspel over there. He'd been working. But I knew him from Berkeley before he was a psychiatrist.
Somehow we didn't connect it.
And it was like, wait, are you Tom? He said, are you Ursula? Oh my God. So he's been working for us for some time, and I never knew. So yes, that job, by the way, I still do today, 28 years. Any more questions, anyone?
You have that 14-point response from Meher Baba, and I'm just curious if you remember the response to Alan Cohen, what Baba said about that.
Yeah, that's one letter that I didn't put in my book because some of it was personal. And what he said to Mick said to him in his letter that Cohen was trying to tell him how to live and what to do and And it was kind of sort of, odd. And Baba wrote back and said, try to straighten it out and fix it with love and kindness. Anyone else? So what time is it?
You say something about the Arbor Cafe?
Oh, the Arbor Cafe. Yeah. The Arbor Cafe was a macrobiotic place, a tiny little macrobiotic restaurant on University Avenue in Berkeley. And it was originally owned by Harold Jameson and Ed Van Buskirk. And there was a house in the back where people lived that worked at the Arbor, and like a bowl of rice and vegetables was 75 cents. And Alan worked there, so Alan knows the price better. And a lot of Baba people worked there and lived in the back. Yeah. So it's 9 o'clock. Thank you.